Karoline Leavitt begs Jasmine Crockett to drop 80 mailers lawsuit, but it's too late to undo the damage. Karoline Leavitt thought she was untouchable. The cameras were rolling. The panel was packed. She leaned forward, smirk curling at the edges of her mouth, and delivered the line that would echo through headlines, classrooms, and courtrooms alike. She's only here because it looks good. She meant Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. And she said it like it was casual, like it was clever, like no one was recording, but they were. The microphone was on. The internet never sleeps. And within hours, the clip had detonated. At first, it played like any other panel, spat a white conservative rising star, takes a swing at a black congresswoman, coded rehearsed, veiled just enough to pass his opinion. The moderator laughed. The audience shifted. No one interrupted. Except Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't clap back. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even change expression. She just crossed her arms and stayed still. And that somehow broke the room more than shouting ever could. In the days that followed, Karoline expected backlash, but not this kind. Not the slow unraveling of power. Not the kind that didn't come with hashtags and hot takes, but with silence, strategic, immovable, deadly. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Jasmine had already filed a lawsuit. $80 million. And when the papers hit Karoline's team, the panic was immediate. Because this wasn't a PR problem. This wasn't cancel culture. This was court. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't just mad. She was precise. Still, Karoline didn't blink. Not yet. She tried spin first. I was just being bold. Then tried victimhood. This is a smear campaign. She went on her podcast, posted a tear-streaked live stream, tweeted that the left was afraid of strong women with opinions, but none of it landed. And then, without warning, Jasmine got a message. A private message. No lawyers, no PR filters, just 88 words from Karoline herself. I know this message might not make it to you, but I have to try. I'm sorry. I pushed too far. I thought I was being bold, but I see now I was reckless. This has cost me more than I imagined. I'm asking you to stop the lawsuit. Please. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. But it was raw. Almost. Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't forward it. She didn't even blink. She handed the phone to her chief of staff and said, "Don't leak it. Let someone else do that if they want." 2 hours later, it hit Twitter. An anonymous account. Verified. The message screenshotted. Karoline Leavitt begs Jasmine Crockett to drop lawsuit. The internet went feral. Some said it was a human moment. A woman humbled. She's breaking. One post read, "Let her go." Others weren't so forgiving. You don't get to torch someone publicly and beg privately, a veteran tweeted. Not when the fire was rehearsed. MSNBC called it the power of public silence. Fox News called it a privacy violation. CNN just played the message on loop. But Jasmine, she said nothing. No press conference, no post, no tweet. Nothing. And somehow that silence burned hotter than any takedown ever could. Inside her Dallas office, Jasmine sat at her desk while her staff scrambled to manage the flood. Emails, donations, op-ed offers. Her chief of staff, Samira, leaned in and said, "People want a response." Jasmine shook her head. "They've already got it." Samira paused. "What do you mean?" I didn't write back. No tweet. No mic drop. Just stillness. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not just in the press, not just on social media, but in the halls of Congress, on high school debate stages, in sermons and subway conversations. She hadn't declared victory, but the world was listening anyway. And Karoline. She started to crack. Her team begged her to respond with poise. Her crisis PR specialist wrote a statement for her, to read one that cast her as misunderstood, stressed, remorseful. She refused. "They think I'm weak," she snapped on a Zoom call. "I won't give them the satisfaction." But her voice cracked as she said it. And someone on that call, someone she trusted, leaked the clip. "I'm not begging. I'm setting boundaries." But the world had seen the message, the screenshot, the desperation. They knew what it was. She blinked first, and Jasmine was microwaving leftovers, sitting at her kitchen table, phone face down. No statement, no thread, just quiet. Across the country, people argued about a silence that wasn't supposed to be public, but now told the whole story. Karoline, who'd spent months ridiculing, minimizing, smirking through other people's truths, now found herself face to face with a mirror. A mirror that didn't shout. A mirror that didn't twist. Just reflected. And Jasmine still didn't move. Because some things don't need a reply. Not when the damage is already echoing. Not when silence has already spoken. And not when an entire movement is already forming around your refusal to play by the rules they rigged. It was just the beginning. But if silence was Jasmine Crockett's weapon, then visibility had always been Karoline Leavitt's drug. She wasn't just a pundit, she was a product. Built for the camera, built for the clickbait, built for the heat of the studio, where outrage was currency and eye rolls were applause. For months, years, even Karoline had carved her name into the political discourse like a blade smiling every time it cut too deep. Now, with Jasmine refusing to respond, that blade was turning inward, and she could feel it. In the quiet that followed her leaked plea, something started to disintegrate. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the way bridges collapse one cable at a time. First, a major wellness brand dropped its sponsorship of her podcast. No warning, no euphemisms, just a PDF with 4 lines. We are no longer comfortable associating our brand with your platform. Next came her morning show booking, a segment she'd been promised for weeks canceled. Officially, the producer said they were restructuring for tone, but Karoline knew what that meant. Tone. The very tone she'd built her platform on sharp, unfiltered bold, now read as reckless, cold, weaponized. Her booking agent stopped returning calls. Her publicist's assistant suddenly moved on. And inside her own home, even her fiancé started pulling away, softly but unmistakably. She noticed. She asked, "Why are you acting like I killed someone?" she whispered at dinner one night. No cameras, no audience. He didn't answer right away. Then, because you won't admit what you did. Karoline didn't reply. She just stood, walked into the kitchen, and opened the fridge. Empty, but for 2 bottles of sparkling water and a wilting salad she didn't remember ordering. She closed the door slowly, as if pretending hard enough could make it all disappear. But it didn't. And the spiral was just beginning. Because while Karoline scrambled to find her footing, Jasmine never moved. Not from her seat in Congress, not from her community meetings, not from her schedule. She didn't alter a single vote, didn't skip a single engagement. If anything, she became more visible without doing anything differently. That's what made it worse. When Jasmine walked into her local school board forum, people straightened their postures. When she asked a question in committee, everyone listened. Her silence hadn't erased her. It had amplified her. And somewhere between Karoline's Instagram followers dropping by the hundreds and her podcast sponsors disappearing without notice, it hit her. Jasmine wasn't trying to win. She was just holding the line. Karoline, desperate to reframe the story, went live again. A private stream for her most loyal followers. No makeup hoodie on, sitting on the edge of her bed. She tried to sound raw, honest. "I don't owe anyone a performance," she said, but her voice trembled. She touched her hair too often. She glanced off camera as if searching for someone who wasn't there. The clip leaked anyway. Of course it did. Some supporters said she looked broken. Critics called it what it was, damage control dressed up as defiance. And that was the moment, the precise second, when public perception shifted. No longer was Karoline seen as bold. She was seen as cornered, defensive, small. Not because Jasmine attacked her, but because Jasmine didn't. And in that absence, Karoline's entire persona started to cave in. It wasn't about losing fans. It was about losing relevance. She paced her living room in Portsmouth, phone in hand, scrolling through group chats that used to buzz every hour. Silent now, ghost towns. Even her inner circle was shrinking. 2 interns resigned within a week. One left a letter I believed in what you stood for. Then I saw who you stood on. She didn't read it twice. Instead, she called a meeting. Emergency Zoom. Topic: narrative control. Her PR consultant was blunt. You need to go quiet. Karoline laughed. Short, bitter. That's what Jasmine's doing? Exactly, the consultant said. That's why she's winning. Karoline clicked end call without another word. Her laptop screen faded to black. And for the first time, she saw herself. Just herself. Mascara smudged, hair pulled too tight, jaw clenched like she'd been fighting a war no one else showed up for. It wasn't rage anymore. It was panic. And Jasmine. She was across the country in Dallas delivering sandwiches to her attorney, Brandon Keyes, like it was any other Tuesday. No press, no headlines, no adrenaline, just quiet, steady work. Brandon looked up from the stack of notes. You're calm? Jasmine shrugged. I've been through worse. And she had. Years of dog whistles, backhanded compliments, being told to smile, more, talk, less, be softer, smaller. She'd done all of it, and it still wasn't enough. So this time, she said nothing, and stayed where she was. Back in Karoline's world, things got worse. Her most loyal sponsor, a nutrition startup that had plastered her face on national campaigns, sent an email. All business ties terminated effective immediately. No statement, no explanation. Just gone. A conservative digital outlet that once ran her columns every Tuesday quietly removed her name from the contributor list. Even the right-wing blogs were shifting their language. No more rising star. Now it was divisive figure. Controversial voice. One headline cut deeper than most Karoline Leavitt from firebrand to liability. And Jasmine still hadn't said a word. Didn't need to. Because the noise was devouring itself. Karoline, refusing to let go, appeared on a fringe talk show out of Boise. Poor lighting. A crooked flag in the background. The host smirked. Teed her up. A lot of folks think you just said what everyone's afraid to say. Especially about Jasmine Crockett. Karoline laughed. Actually laughed. Well, she said, I won't say you're wrong. 10 seconds. That's all it took. By morning, she said it was trending across 5 platforms. Not as support. As a warning. Because it wasn't just tone anymore. It wasn't just language. It was ideology. It was cruelty. Rehearsed, performed, sold as honesty. And the public was done pretending it was accidental. A conservative op-ed was pulled before publication. A liberal columnist wrote, this wasn't a moment. This was a blueprint. And Jasmine didn't respond. She held the mirror. Brandon watched the Boise clip twice. Forwarded it to Jasmine with no message. He didn't need one. Back in Dallas, Jasmine finished a roundtable with social workers. No mention of Karoline, no questions about the lawsuit. A woman approached her after. No selfie, no speech. Just a phone screen playing that Boise clip. She said that the woman whispered, and I thought of my daughter. Jasmine nodded. She's not our focus. Then what is making sure we don't forget the cost? She drove home that night in silence. The inbox buzzed. A new message. Another headline. Jasmine turned the phone over face down and kept driving. Because while Karoline kept pressing her luck, Jasmine never moved her line. She didn't shout. She didn't clap back. She let the storm pass, and when it did, everyone saw who was still standing and who wasn't. The storm had passed, and in the stillness that followed, there was no victory parade, no camera flash, no speech from a podium. Just Jasmine Crockett still standing, still silent, still steady. But silence, as the world was learning, wasn't absence. It was strategy, and it was working. The Boise clip wasn't just another social media moment, it was a rupture. A tear in the last defenses of Karoline Leavitt's public image. The smirk that once sold podcast subscriptions and speaking gigs now looked like the grin of someone caught mid-lie. No longer provocative, just petty, just predictable. The headlines were brutal. The smile that sank a brand, Karoline Leavitt. The fall of a manufactured icon. Even outlets that once flanked her with loyalty had begun to step away. Quietly, one by one. They didn't issue statements. They just stopped calling. And Jasmine. She kept working. A committee hearing on housing discrimination, a local business council breakfast, a tour of a community center in South Dallas. No mentions of the lawsuit. No comments on the viral leak. No reference to Karoline. But the people around her knew something had changed. When she entered a room, it didn't buzz, it sharpened. People listened differently. Even her team felt it. At a late-night strategy session, her attorney Brandon dropped a thick file on the table. "We got it," he said. Jasmine glanced up. "What is it?" "The proof?" Inside were internal prep documents from Karoline's last congressional campaign. Memos, bullet points, color-coded debate strategies. One section was labeled in bold lines to disrupt progressive women of color. Jasmine didn't flinch. She just flipped through the pages. If she talks about race, accuse her of playing victim, one-note read. Pivot to personal responsibility. Don't let her lead the tone. It wasn't a slip. It was a script. Brandon sat down. "We're not asking the court to guess anymore. We're going to show them." Samira Jasmine's chief of staff scanned the top page. She planned every moment of that panel. Every jab. Jasmine said nothing at first. Then it's not about me anymore. It's about the playbook. That became the new focus. Not just accountability, but exposure. Because if Karoline was just one voice, then her strategy was a chorus. A pattern disguised as personality. One Jasmine had seen before. And now the country would too. That week, another name surfaced: Tasha Denton, a former staffer from Karoline's campaign. She called Brandon's office on a quiet Sunday morning. "My name is Tasha. I have something your team needs to see." She didn't ask for money. Didn't want attention. She just sent the files. They were damning. PDFs, notes, rehearsals, and a recording. Karoline's voice crystal clear. "If the panel has any black woman on it, I want at least 2 lines ready. One soft jab, one harder. They're easy to throw off. You just have to sound like you're telling the truth." 3 lines in, Brandon stopped the tape. He called Jasmine immediately. "We don't just have intent now. We have her voice." Jasmine didn't rush to respond. She just asked one question. "Does it change how we approach the courtroom?" "No," Brandon said, "but it changes how the world hears it." And it did. Within 24 hours, the recording had been verified. 2 producers from Karoline's old political talk show submitted sworn statements confirming she'd practiced interruption tactics specifically for black and brown women. She said it kept them emotional. Off-script, one wrote. The final thread was in place. What the world thought was a moment and accident was now a documented, deliberate strategy. Karoline hadn't slipped. She had schemed. And Jasmine hadn't retaliated. She had revealed. The narrative turned overnight. Politico ran a late-night feature. The fall of influence. The rise of integrity. A civil rights watchdog group issued a public statement praising Jasmine for holding the line when the system refused to. And in high school classrooms from Chicago to Atlanta, students debated the ethics of weaponized media personas. One teacher taped Jasmine's quote to the whiteboard. "It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about relief." But Jasmine wasn't on a victory lap. She was in a meeting with her district staff reviewing proposals for a mentorship initiative for middle school girls. "We'll name it later," she said. "Let's just get it moving." Samira leaned in. "You know you've already made history, right?" Jasmine didn't look up. History's not the point. Impact is. Brandon watched quietly from the corner of the room. He'd seen her deflect praise before, but this time it hit different. Because they were approaching something few political figures ever faced: closure. Not manufactured, not manipulated, real closure. And then the call came. Karoline's new legal counsel. Polite, measured, nervous. "We're exploring a possible settlement," he said. "Is your team open to reviewing an offer?" Brandon sat forward. "Put it in writing." 24 hours later, it arrived. 8 figures. No admission of wrongdoing. A full withdrawal from public platforms for a minimum of 2 years. No podcasts. No interviews. No speaking tours. Silence. Brandon slid the offer across Jasmine's desk. She read every word, then asked, "Is this accountability, or is it a shortcut?" He didn't answer right away. "It's whatever you decide it to be." And for once, Jasmine didn't know, because this wasn't about money. It wasn't even about Karoline anymore. It was about what silence would mean next. The file sat on her desk for 2 days, unmoved, unopened. No one pressured her. No one dared. Samira didn't ask. Brandon didn't nudge. It was her call, and that's what made it heavy. That second night alone in her office, she didn't scroll headlines, didn't review testimony. She pulled a folded note from her coat pocket. A little girl named Amira had written it weeks ago. "Thank you for not letting them talk to you like you don't matter." Jasmine read it twice, then looked back at the settlement. Brandon arrived early the next morning, bleary-eyed from an overnight drive. She met him at the door, coffee in one hand, contract in the other. "She's disappearing," he said. "No mic, no platform. 2 years minimum." Jasmine paused. "Does that mean she learns anything?" Brandon looked at her. "We don't control what she learns. We control what the next girl watching this sees." She nodded. "Then we don't sign for money. We sign for closure." And in that moment, silence changed shape again. It wasn't just a response. It was a resolution. The signature was still wet when the headlines broke. Not the kind that scream, the kind that echo. Breaking, Jasmine Crockett accepts landmark settlement in $80 million suit against Karoline Leavitt. But that wasn't the real headline. The subhead told the story that mattered. Terms include multi-year withdrawal from public life. No platform, no podcast, no statement, no voice. And that was the point. Jasmine didn't host a press conference. She didn't send a tweet record, a video, or even call a favored reporter. She posted a single photo, the courthouse steps in Dallas. No caption, just 6 words typed beneath it. "Thank you to those who never asked me to stay silent." It was shared over 200,000 times in 2 days. The press couldn't spin it. Karoline's team couldn't reframe it, because silence doesn't come with spin. It comes with weight. And Jasmine had just made silence the loudest force in the room again. But while Karoline disappeared from the headlines, she didn't disappear from consequence. In her condo in Portsmouth, the silence wasn't empowering. It was suffocating. Her podcast feed inactive. Her booking calendar empty. Her inbox, the one reserved for media opportunities, was void of even spam. She kept refreshing out of habit. Out of desperation. There was nothing. Her former assistant returned the office keys via FedEx. No note. Her fiancé was gone. No call. No final fight. Just gone. The camera she used for live stream sat on the desk, unplugged, gathering dust, like a relic from another life. This wasn't cancellation. It was disappearance. And that was a fate she never imagined. Because Karoline had spent her entire career mastering the art of being seen, of being loud. She knew how to ride scandal twist criticism, weaponize attention. But this erasure was different. You can't fight what doesn't speak back. Meanwhile, Jasmine didn't slow down. 2 days after the settlement, she was at a youth town hall in East Dallas. There were folding chairs, a paper banner, and no national press in sight. She spoke about voter rights, local infrastructure, education equity. Not once did she mention the lawsuit. Not once did she speak Karoline's name. But everyone in the room knew. At the end, a young man raised his hand and asked, "How did you stay calm through all of it?" Jasmine smiled. "Because I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to stop us from pretending some things are okay when they're not." That line spread like roots underground. Quiet, persistent. It landed in lecture halls and teachers' lounges. It was printed on posters, taped to classroom walls in Seattle and Miami, quoted in newsletters from nonprofits in Akron to Atlanta. Even as media moved on, something stuck. Because the story had shifted from confrontation to impact. Jasmine had won something deeper than a legal battle. She had redefined the rules of response. The lawsuit was over, but the effect had only just begun. 1 week after the settlement, she spoke at a public high school in Beaumont. No press, no security detail, just student staff and folding chairs. The questions weren't about politics. They were about voice. How do you get people to listen when you speak softly? She paused before answering. You don't always have to speak louder. You just have to mean it when you do. That answer didn't trend, but it stayed. And back in Portsmouth, Karoline was learning the hard way that absence can echo. Her social media accounts were all deactivated per the terms of the agreement. Her followers couldn't see her, couldn't hear from her, couldn't ask questions or offer praise. And when she opened her phone, there were no alerts, just a blank screen and her own reflection. She started journaling, not because she wanted to, because there was no one else to talk to. One night she wrote, "They didn't destroy me, they just stopped looking at me." Even that truth stung. Jasmine, by contrast, was working on something new. A mentorship program quietly built with her team over late nights and community surveys targeted at girls between 11 and 15. No splashy announcement, no ribbon cutting, just meetings, budget reviews, listening sessions. Samira noticed it one night as she sifted through paperwork in their office. "You know it's rare," she said, "to walk through fire like that and come out steady." Jasmine looked up. "I wasn't steady. I was exhausted. But I stayed on my feet." Brandon smiled from the corner. That's what they remember. And it was. In small rooms across the country, civics classes, nonprofit board meetings, grassroots strategy calls, people began referencing the case not as a scandal, but as a shift. A moment when the playbook failed, when provocation collapsed. At Spelman College, Jasmine was invited to speak, not for politics, not for press, but for leadership. She stepped onto a stage in a charcoal blazer. No podium, just a lapel mic and a stool. The auditorium was full. Not one student asked about Karoline. No one asked about the money. They asked about control, about power, about how to hold your line when the world wants you to fold. Jasmine didn't script her answers. She didn't soften them either. "People think silence is weakness," she said. "It's not. It's strategy. And sometimes it's the only language the world hasn't learned how to twist." One student, voice shaking, asked, "Did you ever want to scream back?" Jasmine smiled. "Every day. But that's what she wanted to drag me out of myself, to make me answer to something I didn't create. That moment landed like a thunderclap, to drag me out of myself. It was quoted in lectures by morning, trending by afternoon. But Jasmine was already home, folding laundry and reading a book while the country repeated her words like gospel. Because when the noise finally stopped, Jasmine didn't rush to fill it. She let it sit. Let it mean something. And maybe that was the real victory. Not that she'd won, but that she'd changed what winning even looked like. Still, there was one more moment waiting. One that wouldn't trend, wouldn't headline, but would remind Jasmine why she never backed down. It didn't happen in a courtroom, on a talk show stage, or behind a congressional mic. It happened in a parking lot. Gray skies, wind tugging at coat hems. A quiet Tuesday afternoon in Dallas. Jasmine Crockett was walking back to her car after a small round table with local business owners. No reporters, no fanfare. Just real talk about zoning permits, loan access, and city maintenance. Her bag was heavier than usual, full of handwritten notes and follow-up lists. And then, just as she unlocked her car door, a voice behind her. Congresswoman Crockett. She turned. A woman in her early 50s stood just a few steps away, holding the hand of a teenage girl. The girl's eyes were fixed on the pavement shoulders, tucked under a navy hoodie that hung loosely on her frame. Jasmine smiled gently. "Yes, I don't want to take up your time," the woman said quickly. "But my daughter, she saw what you did." Jasmine took a step closer, waiting. She asked me, the woman continued voice catching, if she had to shout to be taken seriously. I told her no, but she didn't believe me. Jasmine's gaze shifted to the girl. "What's your name?" "Sky," the girl said, barely above a whisper. "Do you believe your mom now?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. A little. That made Jasmine laugh, not loudly, but enough to warm the space between them. "Well," she said, "that's a start." The mother took a breath like she'd been holding something in for days. "She got bullied last year. One teacher said she was too sharp, like it wasn't a compliment." "You know what I mean?" Jasmine didn't need to ask. She knew exactly what that meant. "I do," she said softly. "You've got fire in you, Sky. The world won't always like that. Doesn't mean you dim it. Just means you learn where to aim it." Sky finally looked up, and Jasmine smiled, not for cameras, not for optics, just for her. "Thank you for not staying quiet," the woman said. They turned and walked away. Jasmine sat in her car for a few minutes after that, not checking her phone, not answering emails, just sitting, breathing. Because that exchange, that moment, would never make headlines, wouldn't trend, wouldn't go viral. But it mattered. Because that was the point of all of it, not punishing someone, not collecting attention, but holding the line so the next girl didn't have to fight the same fight alone. Back at her office, Samira was already scanning proposals for the mentorship program. Brandon was finalizing the legal archive files. The case was officially closed, but its echo wasn't. And across the country it lingered. In Miami, a teacher printed Jasmine's quotes and taped them to classroom walls. In Seattle, a nonprofit launched a new workshop called Holding Your Ground Without Losing Your Voice. Even Karoline's absence was a statement now. Her podcast remained silent. Her media column gone. Her name erased from the lineup of 3 speaking events she was once billed to headline. One conservative commentator tweeted, "She didn't get canceled, she got outclassed." In Washington, D.C., a former congressional aide whispered at a networking event, "That wasn't just a loss, that was a lesson." Even in right-wing circles, whispers started to shift. Because what Jasmine had exposed wasn't just a bad moment, it was a bad model. A political culture that rewarded provocation, punished nuance, and treated dignity like a liability. Now, the playbook was crumbling. And Karoline. She was still trying to fight her way back. A few weeks after the settlement, she uploaded a blurry selfie video, no script, no studio. Just her in a dimly lit kitchen talking into her phone. "I know people are upset," she began voice flat, "but I don't owe anyone a performance." It was meant to sound defiant. But her eyes kept darting off camera. Her hands kept fixing her hair. The strength she once projected now read as performative. Fragile. Supporters said she looked human. Critics said she looked cornered. And everyone else, they just stopped watching. Because the world had seen what happened when someone tried to spin the truth and got outpaced by a woman who didn't even raise her voice. Jasmine, meanwhile, was building. Not campaigns, not brands, structures. She expanded the mentorship program to include financial literacy and public speaking training. She scheduled visits to middle schools across her district. She met with educators, counselors, and social workers, not for show, but for foundation. And still, she never name-dropped Karoline. Not once. Because it was never about one woman. It was about what that woman represented and who she thought she could target without consequence. That's why, at a national youth summit in St. Paul, when Jasmine took the stage for a panel on dignity in leadership, she wasn't introduced as the woman who sued Karoline Leavitt. She was introduced as the Congresswoman who made quiet louder than chaos. One moderator asked, "What would you say to someone who's scared to speak up?" Jasmine paused. Not for effect, but for weight. I'd say it's okay to be scared. Just don't mistake silence for safety. She let that breathe. Sometimes speaking up feels dangerous, but sometimes not speaking becomes a cage. The room was still. Not out of tension, but clarity. Because this wasn't about yelling anymore. This was about listening differently. Back in Dallas, her team started receiving letters, real handwritten letters, from single mothers, teachers, retired veterans, teenagers. One simply read, "I wish I'd stood up for myself like you did." Jasmine kept that one, not to post, not to frame, just to remember. And one afternoon, Brandon looked up from his desk, reading the final press summaries and financial reports. "You know," he said, "it's rare to walk through fire like that and still be steady." Jasmine looked up. "I wasn't steady. I was exhausted." He nodded. "But you stayed on your feet." Even Samira, who had been by Jasmine's side since the earliest campaign days, saw the shift. She said it one evening after a community dinner. "You didn't just win Jazz, you made quiet the loudest thing in the room." Jasmine didn't answer right away. She was already thinking about the next school board proposal, because the noise had stopped. But the work, it was just beginning. Jasmine was already thinking about the next school board proposal when the country decided to remember again. Not with a viral clip, not with a scandal, but with a whisper that reached further than any scream. In a quiet auditorium at a women's college in Vermont, a leadership course launched a unit titled Power Without Provocation. The case study, Jasmine Crockett. The professor didn't show clips from the lawsuit. She played a 38-second video of Jasmine at a budget meeting calmly responding to a question about school infrastructure. Then she turned to the class and said, "That's control." Down in Atlanta, a civil rights foundation printed Jasmine's courtroom statements, ones never spoken from a microphone, but filed in legal briefs and used them in a summer curriculum about systemic deflection tactics. In Portland, a bookstore set up a display titled "Speak Truth Without Yelling." The first book on the stack, a biography of Shirley Chisholm. Next to it, a printed transcript of Jasmine's viral floor speech from 2 years earlier. This was the new narrative, not about what Jasmine said, but how she refused to let the world decide when she should say it. Karoline, meanwhile, had vanished almost completely. No tweets, no appearances. Her social media accounts remained deactivated. Her name had been stripped from a conservative media network's contributor list. Even her most die-hard supporters had gone quiet not out of loyalty, but fatigue. The war of noise was over, and Karoline had lost it by fighting on the wrong battlefield. But while Karoline faded, Jasmine was still building, and sometimes it was the quietest moments that revealed the most. Like the afternoon she visited a local community garden in Oak Cliff. It wasn't scheduled. No aides, no agenda. Just Jasmine walking among rows of tomatoes and sunflowers, stopping when she saw a group of middle school girls with hand-painted signs that read, "Thank you." One of them, no older than 12, stepped forward and handed Jasmine a folded piece of paper. Inside it read, "Thank you for not letting them talk to you like you don't matter." Jasmine folded the note and slipped it into her coat pocket. She bent down, smiled at the girl, and asked, "What's your name, Amira?" the girl said. "You like to write." The girl nodded shyly. "Then you keep writing. Tell stories that tell the truth." Samira stood a few steps back watching. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. By then, Jasmine's steadiness had become a signal, a warning to those who relied on chaos, an invitation to those who'd been made small, and a roadmap for those who wondered if staying calm could ever be powerful. Even the media, now several weeks past the finalization of the case, began adjusting their tone. Not out of guilt, but gravity. The Guardian ran a special report titled, "This Was Never a Slip." It was a script. They published a side-by-side Karoline's offhand panel quote beside leaked strategy notes instructing her team to bait progressive women of color into emotional responses. The nation couldn't pretend anymore. This hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been machinery. Jasmine's refusal to respond wasn't passive. It was surgical. Each time she chose stillness, the story cracked wider. By now, even conservative organizers were backing away from Karoline. A major political speaking tour quietly removed her name from all promotional materials. No statement. No apology. Just erasure. The final blow didn't come from the court. It came from Karoline's own camp. A former strategist, once one of her closest advisors, submitted an audio recording to Jasmine's legal team. In it, Karoline could be heard during a pre-show meeting saying, "If the panel has any black woman on it, I want at least 2 lines ready. One soft jab, one harder. They're easy to throw off. You just have to sound like you're telling the truth." It wasn't just callous. It was structural. Brandon played the clip 3 times in his office before calling Jasmine. "We don't just have intent anymore," he said. "We have her voice." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Does it change our approach?" "No," Brandon replied. "But it changes how the world hears it." He was right. The news cycle didn't explode. This time, it shifted. A civil rights group issued a national statement praising Jasmine for holding the line where institutions hesitated. Politico published an op-ed titled "The Fall of Influence and the Rise of Accountability." And Jasmine, she wasn't celebrating. She was sitting with her district team reviewing proposals for a mentorship initiative targeting girls aged 11 to 15. "We'll name it later," she said. "Let's just get it moving." Samira leaned in. "You know you've already made history, right?" Jasmine didn't look up. "History's not the point. Impact is." That evening, Brandon received a final call. It was Karoline's new attorney. Polite, measured.